Hello and welcome everyone to another anime review, and today people, one thing that harem anime do bring to the table is that a lot of these female characters that are part of the show are very interesting and well-rounded characters. The entire point of the show is that which female character is going to end up with the dude. And so they build a lot of the female characters up without building up the male main character. But today, that's not going to be the case. This harem anime is a little bit different in the sense that the male main character does get quite a bit of development and does have an actual personality that, at least in 2 of the 3 situations, would actually honestly get the chicks to fall in love with him. There are only 3 women in this show that actually fall in love with the guy, so it's just barely considered a harem anime, with at least a hint of a choice at the very end of the show. Now, harem anime have been going around for a very long time. We've seen the generic harem anime as well as spin-offs of the generic harem anime that have their own unique spin on it. But this one, to be honest, is not that case. Now, I know this one is slightly different than another show that I believe most people would probably think of, assuming that they've watched it, of course, when watching this show. But we're going to get into it right away here, and I'll talk about that comparison after my overall score at the very end. So today, we're doing the anime 100. So this story takes place on a boat. Almost the entire story takes place on a boat called Little Garden. And in this world, there are people called Slayers. They are people that protect the human race from these horrible beings that come from outer space called savages. That's right, savages. And, I can't give you an exact reason why they're called savages, but they're these giant green and black monster things that have a core in their cranium that, if you destroy, kills them. As per generic video game rules, there has to be a weak spot, and there is in this case. Now, people who are Slayers can use hundreds. There are these diamond prism objects that can tap into their natural abilities and give them a unique suit of weapons that they can use, basically. Each person is going to be different because each person's 100 is based on their basically genetic makeup. Now, there are also people who are specifically better users than those who aren't, and most of the time those people are called variants. And they have basically have been infected with the savage virus, and it gives them a higher capability at wielding the 100. Now, Hayato Kitsuragi is one of those people. He has the highest 100 capability score of any freshman entering Little Garden. And the only reason, at least at first, that he goes to this ship is so that his sister can get treatment, because she has a very, very bad illness that leaves her unable to stand, and she needs medical attention all the time. On his first day, we're just going to the very, 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 very beginning of episode 1. His first day, he accidentally gets 2 people in trouble, and after standing up for them, he finds himself in a fight with the queen of the boat. And basically, during this fight, he finds out that his variant power can basically control... Well, not... He doesn't personally find out, but it is revealed that his variant power makes him incredibly powerful to the point where he can stand up toe-to-toe with the queen herself, who has been doing this significantly longer and has, no variant power. And as the course of the show progresses, he meets other people and obviously, the whole harem nonsense. So, the show's plot is honestly, in my opinion, around a 2.5 out of 5. About a 50% score right there. The reason being is because something like this is honestly very common. I guarantee most people who have watched significant amounts of anime while listening to that description is like, that sounds like almost every anime ever made. There's a big bad guy demon things that fight. There are people that have the ability to fight them based on, infected virus stuff. I mean, honestly, that's like the very plot of Black Bullet, which came out first, by the way, and was significantly better than this show, to be honest with you. Like, the only difference is that there are pairs, and the chicks are the ones that are the basically variants in this case. Legitimately, it is a plot that honestly can connect to several different anime. And then on top of that, most of the characters in this are women, so it just doesn't quite compute. You know what I'm saying? And in that case, it reminds me of this other show, which we'll get to later. But we've got some characters here, which I'm going to talk about the 4 main ones. So we got Hayato Kitsuragi, who had the highest compatibility score of any person able to wield 100 in the incoming freshman class. And he's also one of the strongest wielders of the 100 that you could possibly think of. He's kind and caring, and he puts other people in front of himself, and his entire goal is to protect the world from the savages and create a peaceful place for everyone to just be able to live without fear of the savages killing everyone, as well as having a thing for his little sister, which is honestly both... I mean, it's not too crazy, but it is at times a little bit interesting. And his sister Karen, is bedridden and can't walk. I'm not really going to talk too much about her yet. She doesn't really play an important role, at least until the end, and that's the ending. But then there's Emil Crossfode. Now, notice I didn't spend a whole hell of a lot of time on Hayato, and while he is more developed than any other main character of a harem anime almost ever, he still is pretty generic at the same time. So then there's Emil Crossfode, which is Hayato's roommate, who befriends him on his first day. He's extremely clingy, and many believe that he kind of has a thing for Hayato. Bet you didn't expect that, huh? But he's a very interesting and eccentric person, and he does have a really strong 100 score as well, able to stand side by side with Hayato, and also being a variant. Then we have Claire Harvey, the queen of the ship, and captain of Little Garden. She's extremely strict and a very authoritarian type of character. She's the leader of the student council, and she's the highest rated slayer in Little Garden and one of the top ones in the entire world. She's honestly basically the designated fan service character, not really anything too spectacular in my opinion. She's one of those characters that Hayato accidentally sort of kind of grabs her boob on an accident, and then all of a sudden she like hits him upside the head and gets all pissed off, and then as time progresses she slowly becomes like infatuated with this dude. It's something you see in like every anime ever made. Which makes zero sense. Then there's Sakura Kirishima, the idol pop star, generic singer that falls in love with the dude, chick. It happens all the time, trust me. But she uses her voice to boost morale and help everyone stay positive despite the savage attacks. And I honestly really liked her character a lot. She has a connection to Hayato, and honestly, the reason why she likes Hayato makes actual perfect sense. And I honestly think they did a good job with that. It's not one of those, this is one time when this guy gave me his fork and I love him. Trust me, that's happened. That's happened. That's an actual thing that happens in anime. This, much more reasonable. Much more reasonable, and actually, I can believe it. I can honestly believe that she would fall in love with this guy based on her reasons. But she's a very eccentric chick that often escapes her manager and goes out, does her own thing. She's very outgoing, but she does have this really dark and gruesome past that she has to deal with on a regular basis that kind of haunts her and distracts her attention away. And it's one of the many reasons why she fights using her voice. It's an actually really good story, and honestly, Sakura is probably, she's my second favorite character in the show. Emil Crossfoot is actually my favorite. I'm not gonna lie, he's fantastic. He's fantastic. But honestly, I'm gonna give these characters a 1 3/4 out of 5. Maybe a 2, maybe a 2. But the problem is, while Emil Crossfoot and Sakura are very good, every other character in this show is extremely generic, and I've seen it. I've seen it all. And to be honest, this entire situation, everything about it, reminds me of Infinite Stratos. But we'll get to that in a second. We'll get that in a second. So then we've got the opening and the music. The opening itself is nothing too special, and the music, the soundtrack, is honestly pretty decent. I do like the music of Sakura's concerts that she puts on. The songs that they use for that are really, really good, and I honestly think that is the reason I gave this a 4 out of 5 for the opening and the music in the show. The opening itself is pretty decent. It's actually a pretty good song. I'll probably rate the opening probably about a 3.5 out of 5, and it not only that, but it doesn't reveal like everything, and it doesn't just, here's the plot of the show and here's everything that happens. It's actually kind of just, generic, I guess. The animation is well done. Everything that you would expect out of an anime that came out, last year. Not really anything too crazy. So I'm going to give it probably a solid 3 out of 5. It's pretty average, but nothing too. It doesn't have anything bad about it. That's for sure. So then we come to the dub or the sub, because the dub just came out, which is the reason why I watched this in the first place. And I'm going to say the dub over the sub. Now, I watched the sub as well, and the sub is not bad. Don't get me wrong, the sub is not bad. But I do like a lot of the dub voice actors and actresses. And on top of the fact that I like them, it's not like you lose a lot of meaning, especially in a show like this where there isn't a whole hell of a lot of meaning there to begin with. I honestly think that watching in my native language, and it doesn't sound bad. You don't lose any meaning. It's not like if we sat and watched it sub, we'd get something more out of the show, which does happen from time to time, because sometimes the dub has to has to do that thing where it matches up with the lips and you just got to cut some things out or add some things that aren't there in the first place. So there's none of that in this show. The plot isn't very intense. It's kind of intense. I mean, the Slayer thing is kind of intense, but it's not like watching it in sub would give me more to the story that I've missed, in a sense. So I honestly think the dub is just perfectly fine, and I'd watch the dub over the sub personally. But let's get to the overall. Now, normally a show like this, I'd be like a solid 3. It's pretty average. It's just a generic harem anime. My problem is this. I've watched Infinite Stratos before. Just like Infinite Stratos, it is a dude surrounded by a bunch of chicks. In Infinite Stratos, he's the only man... Well, that's not... The only man that can use the Infinite Stratos or whatever. There's a cross-dressing chick. Charlotte is my favorite character in Infinite Stratos, though. And each of their frames, their Infinite Stratos frames there, are unique to the person. Just like the 100 is unique to the person. And while in Infinite Stratos, they're not necessarily fighting a bunch of demons, it does have a very similar thing. And not only that, but Infinite Stratos is a lot less intense than this show. This show has a lot more fighting in it and has a lot more, crazy action sequences than Infinite Stratos. Well, Infinite Stratos is a lot more laid back, but it does have a pretty decent amount, and honestly, it's just as entertaining, if not more entertaining, because I do like the dub of that show a lot. I do love the accents in that show terrifically. But when I watched this show, when I watched episode 1 of this show, I was like, this is Infinite Stratos. It's this dude, and there are a bunch of chicks in this school. It's like 90% women. There's like 2 dudes. It's kind of stupid. Especially because in this case, they don't even pass it off as, this is the only man that can ever use a freaking robot frame. Which is one of my problems with Infinite Stratos. But the plot of that show is garbage. But, like in this show, not only does that happen, but it gets in a fight with the Queen, just like, what was it, Cecile? What? The British chick, Railgun, of Infinite Stratos. It's exactly the same. It's mirror images. It's freaking ridiculous. Like, I sit here and watch this show, and the entire time I'm like, this is legitimately just Infinite Stratos, at least for the first half of the show. And there are a lot of scenes that are just like, this is Infinite Stratos, but just with more fighting, and the characters are worse. Which for me, the characters are honestly the most important thing of the anime. I know for some people it's like the ending is paramount. Like, the plot has to be the most intriguing thing. But for me, the characters make everything. Because if I don't care what the characters do and who they are, there's no point in me watching a really good plot. And the characters being fucking awesome can make a horrible plot seem great. And Infinite Stratos was honestly one of those cases. I loved every single character in that entire show except the main character. That's just how it goes with harem anime a lot of the time. But there's just too much there that I don't really care if the main character is fucking garbage, because every other character is fantastic. And in this show, all I could think about was how this mirrored Infinite Stratos, at least to a very, very large degree, and especially at the beginning. And because of that, I can't rate it a 3. I have to rate it a 2. And it's one of those where, I'd recommend you stream it. If you liked Infinite Stratos, you'll probably like this show. And if you like fight scenes, this has a lot of them. But it's also kind of garbage at the same time. I mean, the show's story isn't something super unique and interesting and unheard of. And the many unnecessary, ecchi tropes, like the dude tripping and falling on top of a chick and grabbing her boob, doesn't happen. It doesn't. Like, no dude, when they trip, is just going to fall down with their hand out like this. They're probably going to put it out here because they know where the chick is falling from. Like, it just doesn't happen almost ever. Like, it's just dumb. It's a bad thing. And I know that for some people, it is funny. But here's my biggest problem. As an anime fan here, I like anime a lot. I've watched over 300 different series. That happens far too often. And it's getting to the point where that literally kills shows for me. I mean, I still watch them. But this show was kind of a waste of time, especially for me personally. I mean, there was some positive moments. Again, Sakura and Emil were the reason that I kept watching this show. Those two kept me going. They were strong, really good, well-rounded characters that I really, really, really liked a lot. But this was all the other characters were cookie-cutter, generic anime tropes that you've seen a million times, and the whole thing is basically Infinite Stratos, but in my opinion, slightly worse. So recommendations? Infinite Stratos. I was tempted to just put Infinite Stratos and nothing else because, like, this show is legitimately Infinite Stratos, but, like, with a couple more fight scenes and worse characters. I decided to put a second recommendation, and I'm going to put Asterisk War. Or Asterisk Wars. This has 2 seasons, and it's actually a really, really good show. Honestly, out of all 3 of the shows that I've listed here, Asterisk Wars is the one I'd highly recommend to watch. It does have a little bit of harem nonsense, but not like too extreme. Like, that's not the entire focus of the show. I'd have to do an entire review on it and give you guys everything, but there are a lot of really good fight scenes. Has kind of a cool battle-esque style tournament thing in the 2nd season. It has a very intriguing plot line, really good character development. The main character isn't trash. It's honestly really good. And not only that, but it doesn't have the ridiculous, ecchi garbage that this show has. Like, the character doesn't trip and grab a girl's boob. It's just, there are occasional little things, but nothing to the extent that this show goes to. So I highly recommend Asterisk Wars. If you're going to watch any of the 3 shows on this thing, I'd probably recommend that for sure. But it does have a very specific audience. I'm not saying that no one should watch it. I'm just saying that this show has a very, very specific audience. And if you don't fall into that audience, you will not like this show. It's basically, if you like fight scenes and you don't really care about anything else, this is the show for you. This is terrific. The fight scenes are pretty well done. But that's about it. So thank you all for watching this episode. Make sure you comment in the comment section. Let me know how wrong I am about my opinions, because that's just freaking awesome. And click that thumbs up button down below for me. I really do appreciate all the support on these series. And we'll see you with the next anime review.